I want you to try something for a second. If you're walking outside right now, just look down at the ground.
Or even if you're just, sitting in your living room, just picture the soil beneath your feet.
Yeah, exactly. Because right now, hidden just under the surface, there is an alien civilization. And I mean, I do not use that phrase
Yes,
lightly.
not at all.
I am talking about a civilization that has survived like multiple mass extinctions, including the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs.
Right, the big one.
Yeah, and they've essentially dominated the terrestrial biosphere for over 130 million years.
It really is the most accurate word for it, right? Civilization.
Yeah.
And it's one that we literally walk all over every single day, completely without giving it a second thought.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to fundamentally rewire how you view these tiny creatures. We're going to take the entire encyclopedia of ants and just, rip them out of that mental box labeled picnic pests.
Or kitchen nuisances.
Right. And expose them for what they really are, which is the single most successful social experiment in the history of Earth.
Framing it as a social experiment is just crucial. Because when you actually dig into the biological accounting, the raw numbers, the scale of their success is so massive that the human brain genuinely struggles to process it.
Well, let's just drop those numbers right now to kind of set the stakes.
Go for it.
There are approximately 20 quadrillion ants alive on Earth at this exact moment.
20 quadrillion. That's a 2, followed by 16 zeros.
I tried to do the math on this to make it somewhat comprehensible. And, well, for every single human being on Earth, including you listening to this right now, there are roughly 2.5 million ants.
It's staggering.
Like, you have a personal biological entourage of 2.5 million ants roaming the planet.
And if you step back and look at it strictly from a mass perspective, right? What biologists call biomass, it gets even more intimidating.
Oh, yeah.
Their combined biomass is roughly 12 megatons of carbon.
Which, that sounds like a nuclear yield. But in biological terms, what does 12 megatons of carbon actually equate to?
It means that all the ants on Earth, way more than all the wild birds and all the wild mammals on the planet combined.
Wait, really? Combined?
Combined. Every wolf, every elephant, every eagle, every whale, you put them all on a scale and the ants outweigh them.
That is just wild.
And in certain tropical ecosystems, like the Amazon rainforest, ants can make up 30% of the entire animal biomass. Just them.
30%?
Yeah, a single hectare of Amazonian soil can hold up to 8 million ants. Globally, they make up roughly a quarter of all animal biomass on land.
Okay, let's unpack this, because when I look at those numbers, my immediate instinctive thought is just how?
Right.
If you look at an individual ant, it's tiny, it's super fragile, you could squish it just by accidentally stepping on it. How does a creature less than a centimeter long conquer the entire globe?
They're on literally every continent except Antarctica.
Right. So how do they do it?
Well, that question is the core mystery we're unraveling today. Ants do not dominate because of physical size. They don't dominate because of individual strength or, some high-level individual intelligence.
Okay.
They dominate through decentralized social organization. They have achieved a level of collective, synchronized existence that biologists refer to as a superorganism.
A superorganism, meaning like the colony itself is the animal, the ant is just a part.
Precisely. The colony behaves as a single living entity. It makes complex decisions, it regulates its internal temperature, it adapts to the environment far more effectively than any solitary creature ever could.
Wow.
If the colony is the body, the individual ant is just a single cell circulating within it.
Okay, but to understand how this superorganism operates, we actually need to look at the hardware first, I think.
The evolutionary foundation.
Yeah, because you don't get to 20 quadrillion citizens without a massive, massive head start.
Oh, a head start measured in deep geological time. The common ancestor of all ants likely lived somewhere between 140 and 168 million years ago.
So right in the middle of the Cretaceous period.
Exactly.
Back when the Earth was essentially a dinosaur theme park. And the lineage traces back to a wasp-like ancestor, right? There's this incredible fossil I was looking at.
Sphycomyrmiferae.
Yes. Sphycomyrmiferae.
Found trapped in amber in New Jersey.
Right, and that specimen dates back about 92 million years, I think.
Spot on. And biologically, it's basically a perfect missing link. You look at it, and it has the sting and the short, thick legs of a solitary wasp.
But it has the ant parts, too.
Yeah, it has the distinct worker's thorax and the specialized antenna of a modern ant. It's
Wow.
literally evolutionary history frozen in tree resin.
So they were establishing themselves in the shadows of the dinosaurs, but they didn't just, slowly and linearly multiply. There was an explosive diversification.
Moment where they just took over.
Yeah. And that explosion perfectly coincides with another massive shift in Earth's history, right? The rise of angiosperms.
Or flowering plants,
Yeah.
Roughly 100 million years ago.
So they were the ultimate ecological opportunists.
Exactly. Before flowering plants, the forest floor was a relatively nutrient-poor environment, mostly ferns and conifers.
Not a lot of food.
Right. But suddenly, flowers evolve. And with flowers comes nectar.
Oh, sure.
With flowers come seeds and fruits and a whole new ecosystem of other pollinating insects descending from the canopy to feed.
The forest floor suddenly became a buffet.
It was incredibly rich in new, highly concentrated sugar and protein resources. The ants were already living in the soil and leaf litter, so they capitalized on this new ecological space faster and more efficiently than almost anything else.
They were just the right insects in the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
But let's zoom in on the physical marvels of these creatures, the biological hardware they brought to the table. Because even though an individual ant is just a tiny cog in the superorganism, its physical capabilities are ridiculous. Proportional strength, for example. I mean, we've all heard the trivia that ants can lift a lot.
Yes. A typical worker can carry 10 to 50 times its own body weight.
Which is already crazy.
But in some specialized castes, like the heavy-duty soldiers of the leafcutter ants, they can carry up to 100 times their body weight.
100 times. I was trying to visualize that. For an average human, lifting 100 times your body weight is the equivalent of picking up a full-grown African elephant, strapping it to your back, and just briskly walking away.
It's an absurd amount of power.
And a lot of that comes down to their exoskeleton, right? The mechanics of having your skeleton on the outside.
Exactly. It's partly due to the square-cube law in physics.
Okay, explain that a bit.
Because they are so small, their volume and mass are very low relative to their surface area.
Yeah.
Their muscles, which attach directly to the inside of that rigid exoskeleton, have a mechanical advantage that human endoskeleton, bones inside the body, just don't have.
It's literally biological power armor.
That's a great way to put it.
And then there's the speed. I was reading about the Saharan silver ant.
Cataglyphus bicolor, an incredible species.
Yeah, they live in one of the most thermally extreme environments on Earth, right?
They do. To avoid being baked alive on the desert sand, they forage during the absolute hottest part of the day when their predators are forced into the shade.
Which is such a flex.
It really is. But to survive, they have adapted to run at 67 meters per minute.
Let me translate that into human terms, because 67 meters a minute doesn't sound completely insane until you adjust for scale. If a human ran that fast relative to their body length, they would be sprinting at over 200 kilometers per hour.
Wow.
You'd be passing sports cars on the highway.
All while your feet are touching sand that is essentially hot enough to cook an egg.
Right.
They actually use a specialized galloping gait where all 6 of their legs are off the ground simultaneously, minimizing contact with the scorching surface.
Just flying over the sand. But out of all the physical hardware, my absolute favorite has to be the mandibles on the trapjaw ant.
Oh, the genus Autonomachus.
Yeah.
The trapjaw is a masterpiece of biomechanics. It utilizes a system called latch-mediated spring actuation.
Which means what, practically?
Their mandibles open up a full 180 degrees and physically lock into place. They are held back by immense internal muscle tension, exactly like a heavily drawn crossbow.
Just waiting to fire.
Right. And inside those open jaws are tiny, highly sensitive sensory trigger hairs.
And when a prey insect, or, I don't know, an intrusive human finger brushes against those hairs.
The latch releases and the jaws snap shut in 0.13 milliseconds.
Okay, wait. 0.13 milliseconds. What does that equal in actual kinetic speed?
The closure speed is somewhere between 126 and 230 kilometers per hour.
For an ant jaw.
But what's truly staggering to a physicist is the acceleration. It's 100,000 Gs of force.
100,000 G-force. Fighter pilots start blacking out at, what, 9 Gs?
Usually, yeah.
That is just an obscene, almost incomprehensible amount of kinetic energy for an insect the size of a tic-tac, which actually brings up a physics question I had while digging into this.
Let's hear it.
If you snap a massive steel bear trap that fast and that hard, the trap itself jumps violently off the ground from the kinetic transfer.
Yeah.
So if an ant's jaws snap shut at 100,000 Gs, wouldn't the recoil just violently blow the ant backwards?
That is a fantastic observation.
Yeah.
And it highlights something incredible about evolutionary adaptation.
Right.
You're exactly right about the physics. The recoil is massive. It does launch them.
It does.
It does. But the ants don't view this as a mechanical flaw. They've actually evolved to use it as an escape mechanism. They intentionally use their own face as a catapult.
You're kidding! They weaponized the recoil.
Absolutely. If a trapjaw ant is threatened by a larger predator, say a lizard or a spider, it will point its head straight at the ground and deliberately snap its jaws shut against the dirt.
Oh my God.
The kinetic recoil is so powerful that it launches the ant up to 40 centimeters away through the air, instantly removing it from the danger zone.
So it literally punches the dirt so hard with its face that it goes flying backwards to safety?
Exactly.
That is unbelievable. And speaking of this hardware, we have to talk about the warranty, right? Like how long this hardware actually lasts.
Lifespans.
Because the lifespans in an ant colony are wildly, radically different depending on who you are. Scientific term is dimorphism, right? Two distinct forms.
Yes, extreme sexual dimorphism, which totally extends into their lifespans. If you are a male ant, your life is brutally short.
How short?
You exist for days, maybe a few weeks, at the absolute maximum. You don't forage, you don't build, you barely eat.
Sounds like a pretty raw deal.
It is. Your sole biological purpose is to participate in a brief mating flight, and shortly after mating, your body just shuts down and you die.
A tough draw in the genetic lottery. But then you look at the queens.
Oh, the queens are the undisputed longevity champions of the insect world. There is a specific, heavily documented case, a queen of the species Lycaeus niger, which is your standard, everyday black garden ant.
The ones you see on the sidewalk.
Exactly. One lived for 28 years in a laboratory setting.
28 years. For a bug.
I know.
I mean, think about it. A queen born in 1996 would have lived to see the invention of the smartphone, all while continuously running her colony.
And here is the truly staggering part. Over those nearly 3 decades, she never mates again.
Wait, really?
She mates exactly once, during her initial nuptial flight. She collects sperm from several males and stores it inside her body in a specialized internal vault called a spermatheca.
An internal vault.
Yes. And she chemically halts the metabolism of those sperm cells,
Yeah.
keeping them alive, dormant, and viable inside her body for decades, releasing them one by one to fertilize millions of eggs over her entire 28-year lifespan.
That completely defies everything we think of when we think of insect biology.
It's incredible.
But here's where it gets really profound, because raw physical hardware, spring-loaded jaws, power armor exoskeletons, and 3-decade lifespans, that's impressive.
Very.
But hardware alone isn't enough to run the world. If you want to build a globe-spanning civilization, you need a flawless operating system.
Exactly.
What happens when an individual's brain, its decision-making power, is completely externalized to the group?
Well, to understand that, it requires a total paradigm shift in how we process intelligence and leadership. And the very first step in that shift is completely debunking the biggest myth in the ant world.
Which is?
The myth of the queen.
Yes. Let's tear this down. Because when human beings hear the word queen, we project our own history onto it.
We do. We picture a monarch.
Right. We picture a ruler sitting in a central chamber, issuing commands, telling the workers where to dig and who to attack.
And it is completely false.
Completely.
Completely. The queen does not rule anything. She has zero central command authority. She doesn't process information about the colony's food supply or defensive needs.
So what does she do?
In the anatomical context of the superorganism, the queen is simply the reproductive organ. She's the ovaries of the colony, period.
Just laying eggs.
Just laying eggs.
Yeah.
The macro decisions, like when to pack up and move the nest, where to establish foraging trails, how to respond to an invasion, they are entirely decentralized.
So who decides?
No one and everyone. They emerge organically from the localized chemical interactions of thousands or millions of individual workers.
Okay, so if there's no boss telling anyone what to do, if there's no central planner, how does the work actually get done? How do they establish a division of labor?
Through an incredibly elegant system called age polytheism.
Age polytheism.
It is a strict, ruthless division of labor based entirely on the chronological age of the ant.
Okay, walk me through a worker ant's resume. How does her job change as she ages?
Well, when a worker ant is young, say, in her first 10 days to 2 weeks of life, her exoskeleton is actually still hardening.
Oh, she's still soft.
Right. So she stays deep inside the most secure, heavily guarded central part of the nest. Her job is nursing. She tends to the microscopic eggs, feeds the developing larvae, and grooms the queen.
Which makes perfect evolutionary sense, honestly. You keep the youth, the next generation of labor, as far away from danger as possible.
Exactly. As the ant gets a bit older, her duties radiate outward. She becomes a builder, excavating new tunnels, maintaining the architecture, sorting food.
Okay, I'm moving toward the door.
Eventually, she might become a guard at the nest entrance. And then when the ant reaches the final stage of her life, when she is the absolute oldest, she takes on the most vital but most dangerous job of all, foraging.
Going out into the chaotic above-ground world to find resources.
Yes. And foraging is incredibly lethal. You face sudden rainstorms, predators, getting crushed, getting lost.
Right.
This highlights the cold, mathematically brilliant actuarial logic of the superorganism. Think about it. Human societies revere and protect our elderly. We send our young out to fight our wars.
Yeah.
The ant colony does the exact opposite. It actively sends its oldest, most experienced, but ultimately most expendable members to the dangerous front lines.
Oh, wow. Because they're going to die soon anyway.
Precisely. If a bird eats a 40-day-old forager, the colony only loses a few days of potential labor. The youth, the long-term investment, remain perfectly safe underground.
It's a mathematically perfect system. But a system with millions of specialized moving parts requires massive, flawless coordination.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the communication network. Because these are insects that spend half their lives in pitch blackness, and many species are nearly blind. So how do millions of individuals share information?
They rely on a chemical internet, specifically pheromones.
Now, everyone has heard of pheromones, but I think most people imagine them as just smells, like a biological perfume to attract a mate.
Right, that's the common perception.
But reading through the entomological research, it is vastly more complex than that. It's a highly articulated language.
Calling it a language is entirely appropriate. A single worker ant possesses an array of different exocrine glands scattered across its body.
What kind of glands?
The Dufour's gland, the poison gland, the mandibular glands. Each gland produces different pheromone compounds. The colony as a whole might utilize dozens or hundreds of distinct chemical signatures. Take the leafcutter ants, the genus Atta. They use at least 12 distinct, highly specific pheromones just for managing their trail systems.
12 different chemical words just to regulate traffic.
Traffic, yeah.
And the potency of these chemicals is hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
There was a statistic that just 1 milligram of trail pheromone, like a speck of liquid, is enough to mark a continuous detectable path spanning 60 kilometers.
Which speaks to the profound sensitivity of their antenna. They aren't just smelling, they are reading the chemical environment at resolutions we can barely mimic with lab equipment.
Wow.
They can detect pheromones at concentrations of just a few molecules per cubic centimeter of air.
I kept trying to find a technological analogy for this, and the closest I could come up with is that pheromones operate like self-deleting text messages, or maybe like a highly localized, self-healing Wi-Fi network.
A self-healing network is a great way to look at it. Explain your thinking there.
Well, the research talks heavily about the volatility of these trail pheromones, right? They are designed to evaporate quickly. So if a scout ant finds a massive dead beetle, a rich food source, she runs back to the nest, tapping her abdomen to the ground, laying a pheromone trail. More ants follow that trail, find the beetle, and on their way back, they also lay pheromones.
Exactly.
So the chemical signal gets stronger, acting like a giant glowing neon arrow saying, "Food, this way."
A classic positive feedback loop.
Right. But, and this is the absolute genius part, if the food source is completely stripped to the bone, the ants heading out find nothing, so they don't lay down any new pheromones on the way back.
And because the chemical is highly volatile,
It evaporates into the air in just a minute or two. The road sign literally deletes itself.
which is precisely how they prevent systemic traffic jams.
Yeah.
If the signal were permanent, you would have hundreds of thousands of ants marching toward an empty clearing, wasting massive amounts of colony energy.
Which would be catastrophic.
Exactly. The rapid chemical decay is a built-in algorithmic self-regulation. The physical environment updates itself in real time based on supply and demand.
It's an organically updating data stream. But their communication isn't just external trail marking. They also communicate internally, physiologically, through a process called trophallaxis.
Trophallaxis. If you've ever watched ants closely, you'll often see two of them facing each other, their antennae rapidly tapping.
Yeah, looking very much like they are kissing.
But they are actually regurgitating liquid food into each other's mouths.
Okay, gross, but fascinating.
They possess a specialized organ called the crop. which entomologists refer to as the social stomach.
A social stomach.
Right. An ant stores liquid carbohydrates there, completely separate from its own digestive midgut. The food in the trop isn't for the individual, it's communal property, specifically meant to be shared.
Okay.
But what we've discovered recently is that they are sharing vastly more than just calories.
This was one of the most surprising things in the data for me. Along with the sugar water, they are passing a massive, invisible cocktail of biochemical information.
They are transferring growth hormones, signaling molecules, microRNAs. They are quite literally updating each other's internal physiological state to match the needs of the colony.
Like downloading a software update?
Exactly. But perhaps the most profound revelation highlighted in a major study around 2020 is that they are actively sharing immune components.
Wait, they're crowdsourcing a unified immune system.
Precisely. If one ant encounters a fungal pathogen and successfully fights off the infection, its body produces specific antimicrobial proteins.
Okay.
When that ant engages in trophallaxis, it passes those protected proteins and immunological memory through the social stomach to its nestmates. The superorganism literally inoculates itself from the inside out through sharing food.
That is just mind-blowing. Okay, so just to recap the biological engineering here, we have a superorganism with a perfect age-based division of labor, a self-updating chemical internet, and a crowdsourced immune system.
All working in perfect harmony.
When you put all of those complex systems together, what is the ultimate result?
The result is a society capable of feats of engineering, agriculture, and warfare that closely parallel human civilization.
Which is a perfect segue into the next massive realization. When you have a society this complex, you don't just forage for food, you build infrastructure, you cultivate. The fact is, ants beat human beings to the invention of agriculture by millions of years.
Tens of millions of years. The pinnacle of this are the fungus farmers, the leafcutter ants of the Americas.
These are the iconic ants everyone knows from nature documentaries, the ones marching in huge columns carrying little green sails of cut leaf fragments on their backs.
Yes, and the most common misconception the general public has is that those ants are eating the leaves.
They aren't.
They are not. Their biology cannot process the cellulose in the leaves.
So what are they doing with them?
Instead, they carry those fragments deep underground into massive climate-controlled chambers. Smaller workers chew the leaves into a soft, mushy pulp, and they use that organic pulp as soil to cultivate a highly specific symbiotic species of fungus.
Leucoagaricus condylophorus, right?
That's the one.
So they aren't foragers, they are obligate industrial farmers.
They're completely dependent on it. The fungus produces specialized, nutrient-rich swellings called gongylidea, which is the sole food source for the entire colony. And a single colony can number up to 8 million ants.
8 million?
This agricultural symbiosis is so ancient and so refined that it's been going on continuously without interruption for 50 million years.
50 million years of farming. But wait, let's think about this from a human agricultural perspective. If I am a human farmer trying to grow a massive underground monoculture crop, my #1 enemy is pests.
Right, molds, weeds, blights.
Yeah, an underground ant nest is dark, intensely humid, and packed with decaying organic matter. It is practically begging for harmful parasitic molds to sweep through and destroy the food supply. How on earth does an ant conglomerate deal with agricultural pests?
This is where their evolution becomes truly staggering. They don't just farm fungus, they manufacture pharmaceuticals. The ants cultivate a specific strain of bacteria from the genus Pseudonocardia in specialized porous plates on their own exoskeletons. This bacteria produces a highly potent, targeted antibiotic.
So the ants are literally walking pharmacies.
Exactly. When a worker ant is tending the fungal garden and detects a competing parasitic mold like Escovopsis trying to invade their crop, the ant rubs its body against the mold, applying the targeted antibiotic to kill the weed without harming their food source.
They invented targeted pesticides.
And they invented advanced composting. They fertilized their crops using their own metabolic waste. They have specialized sanitation workers that remove dead fungus and dead ants to remote, designated waste chambers to prevent disease.
Wow.
A mature leafcutter colony is an industrial-scale agricultural operation. To put it in perspective, a single colony can harvest and consume more plant biomass in a year than a fully grown cow.
And their agricultural dominance doesn't stop at farming crops, right? They also manage livestock.
The aphid herders.
Please explain the aphids, because when I read this, it sounded way too much like human animal husbandry to be real.
The parallels are incredibly striking. Many species of ants, particularly in temperate regions, keep aphids or scale insects the exact same way human farmers keep herds of dairy cows.
Okay, so aphids are these tiny bugs.
Aphids are small, soft-bodied insects that use a needle-like mouthpart to pierce plant stems and continuously drink the sap. But plant sap is almost entirely sugar and water.
No.
It's very low in the amino acids the aphids actually need to grow.
So they have to drink massive quantities of sap just to get a tiny bit of protein.
Correct, and they have to excrete all that excess sugar water. They excrete it as a sweet, sticky substance called honeydew.
And the ants who run on high-octane sugar absolutely love the honeydew.
They crave it. So a symbiotic relationship formed. The ants actively protect the aphids. They guard the herd from predators like ladybugs or parasitic wasps.
Like sheepdogs.
Exactly. They will literally pick the aphids up in their jaws to carry them to fresh, greener plant stems when a pasture dries up. And when an ant gets hungry, it walks up behind an aphid and gently strokes its back with its antenna.
And what does that do?
This physical stimulation prompts the aphid to release a droplet of honeydew directly into the ant's mouth.
They are literally milking the aphids.
Yes, and over millions of years of evolutionary time, this relationship has become so deeply entrenched that some species of aphids have completely lost their natural defenses. They no longer develop wings to fly away.
They can't even leave.
They've lost the ability to secrete defensive wax. If you remove the ants, the aphids die. They have been entirely domesticated.
That's slightly terrifying. So we have a civilization that farms fungus with antibiotics and herds livestock for sugar. But to house 8 million citizens, vast agricultural fields, and waste dumps, you need serious infrastructure.
You need monumental architecture, built entirely in the dark, using millions of workers, completely devoid of blueprints or a master architect.
Let's stick with the leaf cutters, the Addonists, because the scale is absurd. How big do these underground cities get?
An Addonist can excavate Earth down to a depth of 8 meters.
8 meters?
That's roughly 26 feet straight down into the soil. A mature nest can contain up to 8 million individual hollowed-out chambers.
8 million rooms.
Connected by a vast, fractal network of highways, specialized agricultural zones, and even deep drainage channels designed to prevent the nest from drowning during heavy tropical rainy seasons.
Oh, wow.
But the absolute zenith of their engineering is their climate control.
The ventilation system? Because this was a physics problem I hadn't even considered. If you pack 8 million respiring animals and tons of decaying leaf compost and a massive metabolizing fungus into a sealed underground bunker, you are generating a lethal amount of carbon dioxide and heat.
Very lethal.
So how do they not suffocate and bake themselves alive?
They utilize fluid dynamics and passive ventilation.
How does that work?
The immense heat generated by the millions of bodies and the fungal decomposition naturally rises. The ants instinctively engineer massive central exhaust shafts that act exactly like chimneys.
Okay, so the heat goes up.
Right. As the hot CO2-rich air rises and escapes out the top of the mound, it creates a localized area of low pressure deep underground. Due to Bernoulli's principle, this low pressure acts like a vacuum, pulling fresh, cool, oxygenated air down through entirely separate, smaller intake tunnels located strategically around the periphery of the nest.
It's an underground air conditioning and air purification system powered entirely by the colony's own body heat.
The nest breathes. It operates like a giant lung. And this design is so thermodynamically perfect, so highly efficient, that human architects have actively studied and copied it.
Really? Where?
The Eastgate Center. It's a massive, multi-story shopping and office complex in Harare, Zimbabwe. It was designed using this exact same passive ventilation principle inspired by ant and termite mounds. It saves massive amounts of energy on mechanical air conditioning simply by mimicking insect engineering.
We are stealing HVAC designs from insects. I mean, it's brilliant. But as with human history, whenever you have massive sprawling populations, concentrated wealth, and vital resources to protect, conflict is inevitable.
Oh.
When you have 8 million mouths to feed in a sprawling underground metropolis, you inevitably bump into neighbors competing for the exact same resources. And when that happens, the illusion of the peaceful, industrious ant shatters.
Which brings us to the harsh reality of their existence, empires, and the art of war. Because when a superorganism mobilizes for conflict, it is the closest thing nature has to a mechanized military machine.
Right.
And the most terrifying embodiment of this is the army ants.
The literature focuses heavily on two main groups, Eciton burchelli in Central and South America, and Dorylus in Africa. Let's start with Eciton. What makes an army ant so fundamentally different from the settled agricultural leafcutters we just talked about?
Well, the leafcutters are settled agrarians. The army ants are nomadic conquerors. They do not build a permanent nest at all.
Like zero nest.
No tunnels, no chambers, no fungus gardens.
So where do hundreds of thousands of ants sleep? Where does the queen lay her eggs?
They construct what is called a living bivouac.
A living bivouac.
When night falls, the workers gather, usually under a fallen log or a tree branch. They literally grasp onto each other's legs and bodies with their tarsal claws, linking together by the hundreds of thousands. They form a solid, living structure out of their own bodies.
That is wild.
It looks like a massive, throbbing brain made of insects. Inside this living ball, they form temporary hollow chambers. The queen is safely in the center, the developing larvae are protected, and the workers constantly shift positions to regulate the internal temperature of the bivouac.
The house is literally made out of the residents.
Exactly.
That is just, wow. And when morning comes,
Biological structure simply dissolves. They unhook, the bivouac melts away, and the daily raid begins.
and these raids are not subtle scouting missions?
Not at all. An Eciton army front can be up to 20 meters wide. That's over 60 feet across. A solid, moving, chaotic carpet of hundreds of thousands of ants sweeping relentlessly through the jungle undergrowth. They flush out, overwhelm, and kill every single insect, spider, scorpion, and even small vertebrates like lizards and frogs in their path. Nothing can stand against the swarm.
I was reading about the African variety Dorylus, also known as the driver ant. Their columns can contain an astonishing 20 million individual ants.
It's an unstoppable force.
And the sheer terror, the absolute predatory efficiency of a 20 million strong column is so absolute that local human communities actually use it to their advantage, right?
Yes, they do. When a Dorylus column is spotted approaching a human settlement, the villagers will often purposefully vacate their homes, open their doors, and let the ants sweep through.
They just let them in.
The swarm will flood the house, penetrate the thatch and the floorboards, and absolutely decimate every roach, spider, rat, snake, and pest inside. Once the swarm moves on, the villagers return to an immaculately exterminated home.
It is an incredibly effective, completely natural pest control service. You just absolutely do not want to be taking a nap inside when they come through.
Definitely not.
Right, because the weapons of mass destruction these superorganisms deploy are no joke. Let's talk about the chemical warfare they use, because ants aren't just biting and stinging.
The variety of chemical weapons is staggering. The entire subfamily Formicinae, which includes many of the common black and brown ants you see on the sidewalk, actually lost their stinger entirely during their evolution.
Really? So how do they defend themselves?
They adapted the sting into a specialized nozzle on their abdomen that sprays highly concentrated formic acid. They can rear up and shoot an aerosolized blast of acid up to 30 centimeters through the air.
A 30-centimeter acid spray from a bug the size of a grain of rice. That's like a human shooting a fire hose of acid 2 blocks down the street.
And then you have the extreme suicidal defenders. The species Camponotus sendersi, famously known as the exploding ant, found in Southeast Asia.
I was absolutely fascinated by the biology of the exploding ant. How is this evolutionary viable?
It perfectly illustrates the unyielding logic of the superorganism. These ants have massively hypertrophied venom glands.
Meaning they're huge.
Massively oversized, running almost the entire internal length of their bodies, filled with a toxic, incredibly sticky glue-like substance. When the nest is under heavy attack and a worker is cornered by an invading ant, she will anchor her legs and violently, convulsively contract her abdominal muscles until her own exoskeleton physically ruptures under the internal pressure.
She detonates herself.
She literally explodes, spraying this toxic immobilizing glue all over the attacker, tangling its legs and antenna, neutralizing the threat completely.
The ultimate self-sacrifice for the colony. I mean, the individual is just a disposable asset. The colony's survival is the only metric that matters.
Exactly. And then moving from lethal glue to sheer agony, we have the bullet ant, Parapenera clavata.
The undisputed heavyweight champion of pain. I was looking at the Schmidt Sting Pain Index.
Oh, yeah.
This is the legendary scale created by Justin Schmidt, an entomologist who basically let himself get stung by every horrific insect on Earth to categorize the pain levels. And bullet ant gets a 4.0 plus O, the absolute maximum rating on his scale.
The mechanism of their venom is horrifying. It contains a specialized neurotoxic peptide called ponerotoxin.
What does that do?
What ponerotoxin does is target the voltage-gated sodium channels in mammalian nerve cells. It essentially jams those channels open, forcing the nerve to fire a continuous, agonizing pain signal directly to the brain.
Oh, man.
Those who've been stung describe it as waves of burning, throbbing, all-consuming pain that continues unabated for up to 24 hours.
Yeah.
Thus the name. It feels like you've been shot.
Okay, so they have acid artillery, they have suicide bombers, they have venom that jams your nervous system. But what happens when you take these incredible weapons and this perfect social organization and you stretch it to a continental, almost unfathomable size? Let's talk about supercolonies, the ultimate empire.
This is where ant biology breaks its own established rules, and the results are planetary in scale. The poster child for this phenomenon is the Argentine ant Lindopithema humili.
The data on this blew my mind. They have formed a super colony stretching 6,000 kilometers from Portugal through Spain and France, all the way to Italy.
A single, continuous, cooperative society spanning across the Mediterranean coastline of Europe.
Just crazy.
Billions upon billions of individual ants, across thousands of miles, thousands of distinct nests, all acting as one massive, unified mega-colony.
But biologically, how is that possible? If an ant from a nest in Spain bumps into an ant from a nest in Italy, how do they not instantly go to war? I thought ant nests were fiercely territorial.
Normally, yes, they are brutally territorial. In their native habitat in Argentina, different nests of this exact same species fight each other constantly over borders.
So how do they tell each other apart?
They identify friend or foe using chemical passports on their exoskeletons' complex waxy molecules called cuticular hydrocarbons. If your hydrocarbons don't match mine, we fight to the death.
So what changed in Europe?
Invasive species dynamics. When they were accidentally introduced to Europe via human shipping, they went through what biologists call a genetic bottleneck. Only a tiny handful of closely related individuals survived the initial transatlantic journey to establish the new population.
So the entire European population is basically deeply inbred.
Exactly. Because of that severe lack of genetic diversity, the chemical passwords on their exoskeletons, those cuticular hydrocarbons, became homogenized. They lost their distinct variations. They all smell exactly the same.
It's like a universal master key was accidentally distributed to every citizen in Europe. Suddenly, there are no borders because every lock opens for everyone.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
So when an Argentine ant from a nest in Portugal is experimentally dropped into a nest in Italy, the Italian ants smell her, register the exact same cuticular hydrocarbon signature, and think, "Oh, you're my sister. Welcome home."
The fundamental mechanism for recognizing an enemy is just broken.
Broken by a genetic glitch. It creates a terrifying, peaceful homogenization. Without the internal territorial wars that normally keep their populations in check, they just expand exponentially, devastating local ecosystems, wiping out native ant species, and dominating vast swaths of the continent.
An empire built entirely on a forgotten genetic password, but as terrifyingly efficient as this sprawling cooperative network is, it isn't invincible. Which brings us to the dark side of the anthill.
The vulnerabilities.
Right, because if an ant colony operates like a massive, highly integrated computer network, what happens when a hacker manages to crack the code?
It exposes a devastating vulnerability. When millions of individuals share a confined space, a crowdsourced immune system, and a chemical language, a parasite that figures out how to exploit that system can wreak absolute havoc.
And the most infamous, the most diabolical of these hackers is the zombie fungus, Ophiocordyceps.
It is the stuff of absolute horror movies, but from a purely biological standpoint, it is an evolutionary masterpiece.
Walk us through the mechanics of this. What exactly happens when a foraging ant encounters an Ophiocordyceps spore?
Well, a worker ant, usually a species of carpenter ant, is foraging on the forest floor and brushes past a microscopic fungal spore. The spore attaches to her exoskeleton. It uses specialized enzymes to literally burn a hole through her chitinous armor, and it enters her bloodstream.
Like a xenomorph.
Basically. Once inside, the fungus begins to replicate and grow. It forms a mycelial network thread-like fungal structures that spread throughout her body cavity, wrapping completely around the ant's muscle fiber.
Wait, it wraps the muscles. I always assumed the fungus went straight for the brain to take over the steering wheel.
That is one of the most shocking discoveries made in recent years. It actually leaves the ant's brain completely intact.
What? Why?
The fungus secretes bioactive compounds that chemically isolate the brain, severing its connection to the body, but it physically controls the muscles directly from the outside, like a puppeteer pulling strings.
So the ant's brain is completely conscious and fully aware, while its body is being driven around like a hijacked meat suit.
A horrifying thought, but yes. Once the fungus has sufficient control, it initiates the final phase. It forces the ant to leave the safety of the colony trails. It forces her to climb up a plant stem to a very specific height, usually about 25 centimeters off the ground, precisely where the temperature and humidity are optimal for fungal reproduction.
It's steering her to the perfect spot.
Yes. It then forces her mandibles to clamp down onto the major vein on the underside of a leaf in a permanent death grip. And only then does the fungus finally consume her internal organs and kill her.
And then the grand finale erupts out of the back of her head.
A massive fungal fruiting body, a stalk, grows violently out of the back of her neck. Over several weeks, it matures and eventually rains a shower of new infectious spores down onto the forest floor below, exactly over the active ant trails, ready to infect her foraging sisters.
Okay, I have to push back on this biologically. If the colony is so flawlessly organized and they have millions of individuals walking on these trails, how does a spore-raining zombie trap not just exponentially sweep through the population and wipe out the entire civilization in a matter of weeks?
Because the superorganism is not defenseless. It mounts an immune response. But it's not a cellular immune response. It's a behavioral one. The ants actively practice quarantine.
How do they know who is sick before the fungus erupts?
Long before the fungal stalk grows, even before the infected ant climbs the leaf, her behavior subtly changes. She becomes slightly sluggish. More importantly, her chemical signature, the pheromone she constantly emits, shifts slightly due to the internal fungal infection.
And the other ants, with their incredibly sensitive antennae, detect the chemical change.
They notice it almost immediately. Healthy nestmates will detect the infected ant, physically pick her up in their jaws, and aggressively carry her far away from the nest.
They just drag her away.
They haul her to a designated graveyard or waste area downwind from the colony. They evict the infected before the contagion can reach its reproductive stage.
Behavioral quarantine, it's incredibly sophisticated. But the fungus isn't the only nightmare lurking in the jungle. Let's talk about the decapitating flies.
The phorid flies. These are tiny, highly specialized flies that have evolved specifically to hunt ants. They hover silently over an active ant trail. When they spot a target, they dive bomb the worker in a fraction of a second, using a needle-like ovipositor to inject a single egg directly into the ant's thorax.
And I'm guessing this larva doesn't just quietly hatch and leave.
Not at all. The larva hatches, migrates the ant's body up into the head capsule, and begins to slowly consume the ant's brain, muscles, and neural tissue from the inside out. The ant continues to wander around, literally losing its mind. Eventually, the larva releases an enzyme that dissolves the connective tissue of the ant's neck. The ant's head literally falls off, and weeks later, the mature fly emerges from the severed, hollowed-out head.
It's relentlessly gruesome. But the ants have a countermeasure for this too, right? Because they don't just endure air raids without a defense strategy.
No, they've evolved a highly specialized, almost militaristic defense, particularly visible in the leafcutter colonies we discussed earlier.
The ones carrying the leaves.
Right. The phorid flies strategically target the large, heavy-lifting worker ants, because those workers are busy carrying massive leaf fragments and cannot easily fight back or drop their cargo. Recognizing this vulnerability, the colony produces a specialized caste of extremely tiny ants called minims.
What is the biological purpose of the minims?
Their entire purpose is to ride shotgun.
I love this part.
When a large worker is marching down the trail carrying a leaf back to the nest, a tiny minim ant climbs up and sits directly on the leaf fragment. As the large worker marches, the minim acts as a spotter. It scans the sky, and if a phorid fly tries to land and lay an egg, the minim lunges at it with its jaws, aggressively swatting the fly away.
That's amazing.
There are dedicated anti-aircraft gunners protecting the supply lines.
I just love that image. A tiny ant riding a leaf like a tank commander, swatting away flies. But there is one more hacker we have to talk about. And this one isn't a fungus, and it isn't a fly. It's an inside job. It's another ant, the slave-making ants.
Yes. The biological term is social parasitism, specifically a practice called dolosis. And the most dramatic, infamous example of this is the Amazon ant, Polyergus rufescens.
Reading about these ants was genuinely shocking. The literature says they have devolved to the point where they cannot even feed themselves.
It's true. They have completely lost the behavioral programming to perform basic, necessary colony tasks. They do not forage for food, they do not nurse their own young, they do not excavate tunnels.
So what can they do?
Well, their mandibles have evolved away from being useful tools into long, sharp, saber-like blades. Those jaws are absolutely perfect for piercing armor and killing in combat, but they are entirely useless for delicately picking up a piece of food or carefully holding a fragile larva.
So if they can't feed themselves or raise their young, how do they not just immediately go extinct?
They survive purely by raiding and exploiting other ant colonies. Specifically, they target the nests of completely different species, usually Formica fusca.
Okay, so they attack them.
The Amazon ants mass together, march in a highly coordinated military formation, breach the Formica nest, use those saber jaws to slaughter the defenders, and then they plunge into the nurseries to steal the pupa, the developing Formica ants that are still wrapped in their silken cocoons.
They bypass the adults and steal the unborn babies?
Yes. They carry the stolen pupa back to their own Amazon nest. Weeks later, when those kidnapped Formica ants hatch, they emerge into the dark interior of the Amazon nest. But because ants rely almost entirely on chemical scent rather than sight, and because they imprint on the ambient odors of the nest they hatch in, the young Formica ants do not realize they've been kidnapped.
They don't know.
They're chemically brainwashed.
So they just wake up, smell the nest, and instantly start working for the enemy.
They treat the Amazon nest exactly as if it were their own. Their biological programming takes over. They dutifully forage for food, they repair the tunnels, they groom the Amazon brood, and they literally feed the adult Amazon queens and soldiers mouth to mouth via trophallaxis.
That is so dark.
Without this stolen labor force, the entire Amazon colony would simply starve to death within weeks.
It is a dark, incredibly complex ecosystem. It really challenges our human morality to see slavery hardwired into evolutionary biology.
It certainly does.
But despite these vulnerabilities, the zombies, the flies, the parasitic mind control, the collective intelligence of ants remains so profound, so highly optimized, that human science and technology are now actively studying them to solve our own cutting-edge problems.
Exactly. We are increasingly discovering that ants possess and exhibit behaviors that we long assumed were exclusively human, or at least exclusive to highly developed vertebrates like primates or dolphins.
Let's run through some of these because they completely shatter the illusion that these are just simple robotic bugs. First up, teaching. Real, active, pedantic teaching.
Yes, observed beautifully in a tiny species called Temnothorax. They practice a behavior known as tandem running.
How does that work?
If a scout ant finds a particularly good, rich food source, she returns to the nest, but she doesn't just lay a pheromone trail and leave. She finds a naive worker, a student, and physically leads her to the food. But she doesn't just run there at top speed. She runs a few steps, then stops, and waits for the student ant to tap her hind legs with its antenna.
It's an interactive feedback loop.
Precisely. The tapping confirms that the student is keeping up and has memorized the local physical landmarks. If the student falls behind, the teacher stops and waits.
Wow.
It fits the strict biological definition of active teaching. The teacher alters her natural behavior entirely, at a cost to her own efficiency, purely for the benefit of the student's learning.
That's incredible. And then there's medicine. We touched on the internal immune system sharing, but there is active battlefield trauma care happening too.
Yes, pioneered by the Matabele ants in sub-Saharan Africa. They specialize exclusively in hunting termites.
Which are tough.
Very. Termites are heavily armored prey with massive crushing jaws. The hunts are dangerous. Many Matabele ants get severely injured, legs bitten off, terrible lacerations. But instead of abandoning the wounded to die, which is what we would expect from the ruthless superorganism, the Matabele ants actively carry their injured comrades back to the nest.
And they don't just drag them back to die, they treat them.
Once inside the nest, specialized worker ants actively lick the wounds of the injured soldiers, applying specific antimicrobial secretions from their metapleural glands to prevent lethal infections.
And the data shows this actually works.
Incredibly well. Without this treatment, the mortality rate of the injured ants is extremely high due to soil pathogens. With the treatment, mortality drops by over 30%. They are actively practicing triage and trauma medicine to preserve valuable, experienced hunting assets.
Fascinating. What about rest? Because the old folklore is that ants never sleep. They are the ultimate symbols of endless industry. But that's a myth, isn't it?
A complete myth. They absolutely do sleep, but they do it in a highly fragmented way that perfectly maximizes the colony's continuous efficiency. An average worker ant takes roughly 250 microscopic naps a day, with each nap lasting just about 1 minute.
A 1-minute power nap 250 times a day?
Which means that at any given moment, the vast majority of the colony is awake, active, and working. The colony as a whole never sleeps, even though every single individual gets sufficient rest. And surprisingly, entomologists have also discovered that they maintain a strategic labor reserve.
A reserve.
In many colonies, up to 20% of the worker ants appear to be essentially lazy. They just stand around doing almost nothing.
Wait, really? Lazy ants. I feel so validated. I thought they were the ultimate models of productivity.
They aren't lazy. They are a vital buffer. If a sudden disaster strikes a tunnel collapse, a predator attack, or if a massive fleeting food source is discovered, these inactive workers are instantly mobilized as an emergency reserve force.
Oh, that makes sense.
Furthermore, studying these groups has shown that individual ants display distinct personalities. Some individual ants are consistently bold, aggressive risk takers. Others are inherently shy and cautious. The superorganism actually requires a balanced mix of both behavioral types to function optimally in a chaotic environment.
Okay, here is the fact that absolutely melted my brain in this section. The jumping ant, Harpinethos solitaire, it literally rewires its own brain architecture.
This is one of the most exciting breakthroughs in modern neurobiology. In most standard ant species, if the queen dies, it's a death sentence for the colony. No new eggs are laid, the workers slowly age out, and the colony fades away. But in the Indian jumping ant, if the queen dies, the female workers sense the absence of her suppressive pheromones, and they initiate a massive physical tournament. They duel with their antenna. The winners of this multi-day tournament undergo a radical physiological transformation.
They transform into queens.
They become what are scientifically called gamergates, reproductive workers. They undergo massive internal changes. They develop functional ovaries to begin laying eggs and saving the colony.
That's already crazy.
But far more incredibly, their brains physically shrink by nearly 20%. They completely shift their genetic expression to stop producing foraging-related venoms and spatial mapping neurons and start producing vital reproduction hormones.
They physically dismantle and rebuild their own neural architecture.
Yes, and the kicker is it's reversible. If you experimentally remove a gamergate from her reproductive role, her brain regrows, her ovaries shrink, she reverts back to a foraging worker. This level of extreme neuroplasticity, the ability of a fully mature adult brain to radically rewire its own structure, is providing researchers with vital clues to understanding the mechanisms of neuroplasticity and regeneration in mammalian brains, potentially including our own.
From a jumping ant's brain to a human's brain. But the biggest, most direct human application of ant intelligence isn't in biology or medicine at all, it's in computer science. The algorithm known as ACO and colony optimization.
This is perhaps the greatest, most ubiquitous tribute to ant intelligence in the modern world. In 1992, a computer scientist named Marco Dorigo was studying how ants find the absolute shortest path between their nest and a food source.
Using the pheromones.
Right, he realized that the mechanism they use laying evaporating pheromones, where shorter paths are traveled faster, thus accumulating more pheromones faster, creating a positive feedback loop, was a perfectly elegant mathematical model for solving incredibly complex routing equations.
So how exactly does pheromone math translate to human technology? Where do we use this?
Everywhere. The ant colony optimization algorithm is fundamental to modern logistics. We use it to route digital data packets efficiently across the chaotic, ever-changing nodes of the global internet.
Wait, the internet uses ant logic?
Yes. Telecommunications companies use it to optimize cellular networks. Major airlines use ACO to dynamically coordinate flight schedules and crew assignments. Massive global delivery companies use it to instantly optimize their supply chain logistics and delivery truck routes to save millions of gallons of fuel.
We are quite literally running the backbone of the modern digital and logistical world on software invented by blind insects millions of years ago.
Exactly. We are just borrowing their code.
That is just incredible. And that brings us to the end of our journey today. We've spent the last hour exploring a vast alien civilization right beneath our feet. We've looked at creatures that invented industrial agriculture, massive passive ventilation architecture, targeted pharmaceuticals, and mathematically optimal routing algorithms tens of millions of years before the first human ancestor even stood upright on the African savanna.
It is a profoundly humbling realization. When you look closely, ants are not individuals in the way we traditionally understand the word. They are sprawling, highly intelligent, infinitely resilient biological networks.
And that leads me to a final thought, something for you to mull over the next time you're walking outside and you see a tiny black ant scurrying across the sidewalk.
Yeah.
We humans are incredibly proud. We consider our individual consciousness, our big centralized brains, our skyscrapers, to be the absolute pinnacle of terrestrial evolution. We look at the globe and think we are the undisputed rulers of Earth.
We certainly like to think so.
But when you look at the cold biological facts, when you see that ants make up a vast portion of the world's animal biomass, that they have survived multiple apocalyptic mass extinctions that wiped out the dinosaurs, and that they peacefully manage global supercolonies spanning thousands of miles. If an impartial alien biologist visited Earth to catalog the dominant life forms, would they really look at our messy, divided, relatively brief history and conclude that we are the dominant species? Or are we just loud, bulky, highly destructive guests living deep in the age of the ants?